Heard it in the hot bags. I've lost my voice a little bit, so I'm gonna sound even more muted and emotionless than usual, even more depressed and unenthusiastic if that were possible. Here today is a catch-up review of a bunch of 2021 movies. Eternals, okay, what did I think of Eternals? I didn't dislike Eternals as much as everyone else seemed to, but I do get why this was a big miss for Marvel. It's not necessarily bland like a lot of other Marvel films. I wanted to like it, I was trying to be enthusiastic about it because it did seem a little bit different. It felt very ambitious. The pacing and the character development were its biggest weaknesses. There are too many characters with too little screen time. This should have been one of Marvel's Disney Plus shows, just judging by the whole concept of the film. It really should have been one of those. I don't know why they didn't do that. That's how you do this properly, with all of these characters and this scope and this story. It actually seems ridiculous that you have all of these shows that they're doing right now, these big budget shows, and they didn't make this one a show, they made it a film. Because it's a broad scope, it's a big timeline, it's a big cast. It screams TV show. The pacing is just royally fucked. There are so many characters. So you imagine the first act of these kind of films are like getting the band back together. Because there are so many people to introduce, the getting the band back together sequence goes on for like 2 hours. And you know that moment in a film, the end of second act punch, where something bad happens, maybe one character dies, that takes place, like a character dies, a hero falls, before they've even assembled the whole team, before they've introduced all the characters. Because they're just, oh my god, we've still got like 5 more people to introduce, even though it's the end of the second act. So there are a lot of characters, and the ones that were most interesting to me got the least amount of screen time, unfortunately. The main woman, possibly the blandest choice of character you could have gone with as the lead for this ensemble movie. She's just a bland, basic, attractive, compassionate woman. She's good and kind because the script says she's good and kind. She's thoughtful because she's thoughtful. With Salma Hayek's character, there's a scene where they at least flesh out her perspective on humanity, and you see her compassionate side, and they actually show you a bit of that. They flesh her out a little bit in this particular scene where she goes off on a monologue. With that, I at least bought why she was the way she was. She had a natural character for that scene. I was like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Character development. Important. One sec. Richard Madden joins the MCU in this, and he was underused. His villain was boring. Also, the concept of giant cosmic beings was underused. How do you make a film about these celestials boring? Killing of a Sacred Deer Kid is in this. He was one of the interesting characters. I liked him, but again, didn't have enough screen time. The gay black mechanic guy, who I think is from Atlanta, he was also good. One of the more charismatic people. You didn't see him until like after the fucking second act. You know why Disney have made him gay. It's unfortunately not for any genuine reasons. No artistic reasons that complement the story. And you could say that being gay doesn't have to be part of the story. Like, it can just be there. And that's true. They at least had a scene of him kissing his partner. They at least had that in there, which shows a bit more conviction than No Time to Die. No Time to Die had Q being gay, and he was just like, oh well, I've got a date tonight, and it's like he's coming in a minute. I've got a date with tonight. Yeah, it's no big deal. He's gonna be there, innit? I think every film from now on with a gay person in should just have them go up to the camera, get fully naked, wiggle the dick around a bit, and say, I'm the gay one. Hello. The Indian character was okay. I'm glad they actually embraced some of that culture. They actually showcased a bit of the Bollywood industry for a little bit. Showed a little bit of that world. That was a cool angle. They also let him speak in his own accent. They didn't Americanize him like they did with the Shang-Chi guy, where it's just like, you're just an American basically. Like, hey man, What's going on? This film is directed by Chloe Zhou, who directed Nomadland. Marvel have a habit of hiring these indie directors to come in and add some flair to these popcorn flicks. The funny thing is though, is that Chloe Zhou isn't even good as an indie director. Nomadland was a pretentious student film. Eternals actually has more going on. I think I prefer Eternals to Nomadland. There's literally more substance in this film. Chloe Zhou does have her own kind of distinct cinematography style, because I'm always complaining about these Marvel films having drab cinematography, all looking the same. But the thing is, what Chloe Zhou did with this film didn't impress me either. Like Nomadland, it's meaninglessly shot like a Terrence Malick film, and on occasion it has these pretentious montages that gloss over key character or story moments. She's just not a very impressive filmmaker. So the artistic things she adds to this Marvel film aren't good additions. This whole film is just a squandered opportunity to do something different and interesting with the MCU. The Tragedy of Macbeth is the latest film from famed director Joel Coen of the Coen brothers. It's only the one brother this time, they seem to have split as a pair. Ethan Coen is not here for this one. So Tragedy of Macbeth is yet another retelling of the classic Shakespeare play Macbeth. You all know the story, don't pretend you don't. This is much more aiming to be a filmmaker's artistic experiment than it is a straightforward, entertaining movie. The whole film is shot in a very unconventional way. Everything is presented and structured around the camera as if it were taking place on a stage. This goes for the actors' performances as well as the blocking, the aspect ratio and the set design. Obviously all done so intentionally, but some people might find it jarring, as in it may all feel put on. From what I remember about Macbeth from school, the dialogue in this film is scrutinisingly accurate to the play, so as it was in school, it's confusing to listen to, and you're not always 100% sure as to what's being said. But it is still Shakespeare, so there's a lot to admire about how the dialogue is written, and you're always on board with the general gist of the story. All of these artistic decisions that have been done to make it more play-like make this film very visually stand out, and it's an interesting piece to add to the catalogue of Joel Coen's work. The cinematography makes good use out of the black and white. You can tell it was always meant to be black and white from the film's conception through the way it balances light and dark. A lot of the shots look more like drawings than sets, and there are some beautiful shots in here that implement a lot of surrealism and minimalism. It's all been properly envisioned and orchestrated. The cinematography of the Tragedy of Macbeth seemed to echo the motifs of old German expressionist films from the 20s. I'm not sure if they actually did take inspiration from German expressionism or it's just a coincidence, but nevertheless, the cinematography is surreal and mesmerizing, and is probably my favorite aspect of the film.
So he was going to use filmic influences mainly from German expressionism.
On an enjoyment level, this film took a while for me to break into. As the dialogue is old-fashioned, it's also very alienating, and I didn't strongly connect with many of the characters emotionally. They were saying the lines, it was poetic, the performances were fine, but because of the overt stage play style of the film, a lot of the time you just see professional actors acting rather than the character. As I am familiar with the Macbeth story, I was curious as to how Joel Coen would add his own thematic significance to the text in this new adaptation, but that's not really what this film's going for. It's just a very faithful cinematic retelling of Macbeth, and the most unique part about this adaptation is the visual depiction of the stage play aspect of the story. It's a very famous story, so this film does feel very procedural for most of the runtime. Yeah, this is Macbeth. This is what happens in Macbeth. This character does this character dies, they kill that person. He sees a ghost at a feast. 3 fucking witches, 3 fucking cunts fucking harass him. Fucking bastards. Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa also did a film adaptation of Macbeth called Throne of Blood, and that I'd highly recommend. That stands on its own a lot more as a movie. I'm probably not going to revisit this film for a long time, as I don't think it'll have much rewatch value. I don't think there'll be anything more to discover. You get the entire purpose of the film on first viewing. It's still a special little movie though, I'd recommend it to anyone really. Denzel Washington is really good. There's a lot of very talented A-list actors in this. It's not Joel Coen's best work. It's a cool little filmmaker's experiment of a movie, rather than a triumphant, all-encompassing masterpiece. The Last Duel is a period epic directed by Ridley Scott, or Ridley Thought as some call him. For years now I've been very indifferent to Ridley Scott as a director. He hasn't made a great film in years. I think maybe Black Hawk Down was the last one he made that I thought was substantial. Alien is one of the greatest films ever made and he should always be remembered for that. Blade Runner was insanely influential. Gladiator I'm less enthusiastic about. It's a good film, but I wouldn't say it has the same filmmaking intricacies as Alien and Blade Runner. Gladiator started Ridley down a path of big budget period piece films that have all felt very lackluster. They have the production value, they have the acting, they're gritty and visceral, but something is always missing for me. Be it a good engaging story or well-defined characters that you connect with, they all feel very hollow despite how much work goes into them. The Last Duel is the first Ridley Scott film in years that engaged me both on a production and narrative level, which feels great to say. And I think that this is partly down to the fact that it keeps things simple. It stays nicely centered around the same small group of characters. It's very character driven. It's not overly convoluted. The story is simple but gripping. These period epics that Ridley makes usually follow characters that come across fairly stale. They have A-list actors playing them, but it doesn't feel like a character, more so something for said actor to add to their demo reel. Oh yeah, I was also in a Bible movie. The characters in The Last Duel feel like characters. Adam Driver is always good, and he once again kills it in this film. Matt Damon was the one I was most worried about. Remember, I want to be forgetting that it's Matt Damon. I want to see a legitimate character, and for the most part, I think that was also achieved. I enjoyed Matt Damon's performance a lot. Jodie Comer's excellent. Honestly, it's probably like an Oscar caliber performance. She's probably the standout performer in this. She sells you on everything so well. All the shit she has to deal with, all the emotions, it's all 100% believable. Even Ben Affleck is good in this. Not only is the story good, but the themes of this film as well are solidly put across. Themes of female subjugation are effortlessly conveyed through thoughtful storytelling. I'm just so appreciative of this because it's a subject matter that's been made into a trend in current day Hollywood. There's so many pandering films that try and tackle this theme for purely exploitative reasons. Unironically, The Last Duel is a solid female empowerment movie. And once again, it's great to actually be able to enjoy a Ridley Scott film. One thing Ridley Scott definitely knows how to do is medieval action. He's the master of it. And now, in The Last Duel, I'm immersed in the story, I've connected with the characters, so this time when the gritty, gory, visceral, medieval action set pieces came, I could fully appreciate them along with what they added to the story. The Last Duel is one of the greater films of 2021, and it's an easy recommendation to anyone who just likes a good, well-acted, well-told story. It's on Disney+, go check it out. Okay, Black Widow. Marvel are trying their absolute hardest to make it so I haven't got anything to say in this review. I'm just so uninspired to say anything. Black Widow. Black Widow, guys. The new Marvel film. I guess the less I talk about this film, the more I can talk about the good ones. So I suppose it's supposed to be this unlikely family film, but it fails at that. The characters don't have enough development. It's actually quite rushed. Like, it just ends after nothing of any significance taking place. I know I keep sucking James Gunn's dick, but he would have easily made this a much better film if he was the director. He is so skillful at depicting these dysfunctional, offbeat groups. And he always manages to evoke genuine emotion from these big dumb blockbusters. So it's a shame that he wasn't involved. Black Widow is one of the least interesting MCU characters. And I always thought that this was one of Scarlett Johansson's weakest roles of all the things that she's been doing in the last couple of years. Because I actually really like her as an actress, but she's just so boring in these Avengers films. Florence Pugh is in it from Midsommar. I'll always have a soft spot for her because of that brilliant film. She's not really got a great character to work with here, so underused. She's nice to look at, obviously, but I don't think that's the sole thing I'm supposed to get out of her character. Ray Winston is beyond awful. There's going to be a clip of his acting, and there won't be any further explanation needed.
I'm not controlling you, Natasha, but there is a pheromonal lock. Smelling my pheromones prevents you from committing violence against me.
So basically, right now I'm about to speak about David Harbour, but in my notes I briefly put Jeffrey Tambor because I for some reason thought that was his name. And I thought it was funny because then I realised who Jeffrey Tambor was. So yeah, Jeffrey Tambor has the words Karl Marx tattooed on his knuckles. I thought that was just funny. Oh, I just noticed it. I was like, oh yeah, because he's Russian. Yeah, Karl Marx. He's the only Russian big leader guy we know about in America. I think Karl Marx is that guy in Civ Rev that you can unlock. Got a little subheading here in my notes that says things that stood out to me. Whoa. Just little morsels of quality from this film that I kind of liked. Florence Pugh's description of the sterilisation that she and all of the Black Widows went through. When she's talking about it really nonchalantly and really graphically and making David Harbour / Jeffrey Tambor pretty uncomfortable, I thought that was like good in a way because, you know, obviously there's supposed to be feminist themes in this film and they aren't really done well at all, but when they brought that up, at least they didn't shy away because it is like a stupid kids film and they went, you know, they were saying, yes, they cut out the fucking organs, they cut out the uterus, it's all out. And I thought, oh, that was surprisingly graphic and brutal and explicit for a Marvel film, so at least you're committing to that a bit. It's not a good feminist film. I just appreciated the graphic nature of it. Like, oh, fucking hell, that's gruesome.
Yeah, that's what happens when the Red Room gives you an involuntary hysterectomy. They kind of just go in and they rip out all of your reproductive organs. They just get right in there.
Another moment was when Scarlett Johansson broke her own nose. I won't give context as to why, but yeah, she has to break her own nose. It's pretty hardcore because there's blood, and you don't really often see blood in a Marvel film, and I thought, oh shit. At that moment I was like, whoa. Little morsels again. Other than that, there's nothing that really stood out to me about this film. This does not need to be watched by anyone. This should be and will be forgotten. It's a nothing movie. But what do you give it out of 10? Gay out of 10. Last but most certainly not least, Licorice Pizza. Licorice Pizza? Licorice Pizza. Licorice Pizza is a film that is set in 1970s San Fernando Valley, wherever that is. It is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is my favourite director. I made sure not to go into this film thinking, oh, I better really love this film because it's my favourite director. I tempered my expectations, as you should with all films, as everyone should. Paul Thomas Anderson, for your information, directed films like There'll Be Blood, The Master, Boogie Nights, Punch Drunk Love, Phantom Thread. A lot of his films are among my favourites of all time. I think there's a lot of masterpieces there, a lot of flawless movies. This new film is above and beyond competent. Like a usual Paul Thomas Anderson film, it has gorgeous cinematography that's not just there to be show-offy but purposeful as well. As in, it's not pretentious. It complements the film's scenes in the right ways. I'd say PTA is a master filmmaker, and this is another solid movie. It's about a dysfunctional relationship between a 15-year-old boy and 25-year-old woman. People are up in arms about that, apparently. Like, the actors are both of age, and this film is about a dysfunctional, clunky, juvenile relationship. The film just shows this relationship as it is. It just captures what's there. To just put a blanket statement of, oh, but he's only 15, what the fuck's wrong with everyone, over this film, just speaks to your one-dimensionality as a person. If that's the only thing that was on your mind when you came out of this film, Like, good fucking luck. Like, you're just a boring bastard, I guess. The film is well aware of the absurdity of the relationship. It's a part of the flaws and traits of the characters. It's a coming-of-age film that deals with very real things that certain 15-year-old boys growing up in the 70s would have gone through. A real experience. I honestly thought the relationship was so tastefully done. You can tell Alana doesn't want to take advantage of Gary, all the while she's fighting this yearn to be intimate with him. It's a juvenile love that's come too early, and it can't really come into fruition, despite how much the characters both want it to. It's not meant to come into fruition. Alana knows that she can't really truly embrace this kid as a partner. And you can say, oh, doesn't it say something about her character that she's even contemplating having a relationship with this 15-year-old boy? Yes, it does. That's the whole fucking point of the film. That's what this film's about. It's about the moral complexity, the moral grey area of the situation, because he is essentially an adult in all but age, and that's why she's conflicted. He's running his own fucking business, mate. I'm like 22. I'm not like anything like that. He is way more of a man than I am. This is a breakout performance from Alana Haim. She gave the best performance in this film, I think, or at least she was the best character. Of the two leads, she was the most fleshed out for me. I loved how she was just so ordinary looking, like the actress. I'm not trying to be mean, but she wasn't necessarily a classic beauty. She was just basic. She's just unapologetically ordinary looking, and it's just kind of refreshing. They both are, because he's got like the imperfections of having like spots here and there, which you can't never see in like films. Actually, you barely see like those spots that are just there when you're that age. Gary was good, but there were times when he felt a little too simple and repetitive. And you can say that also is kind of the point. Like, he's a 15-year-old kid, he doesn't have a fully developed personality. It's supposed to be like that, it's by design. But still, because it is a Paul Thomas Anderson film, it invites the comparison to other male protagonists from his other films. I don't relate to him anywhere near as much as those ones, or I don't as strongly connect with him in the ways that I did with these other characters. And that brings me to my next point, which is, overall, I didn't love this film. I didn't connect with the story and characters as much as I did with other PTA films. The relationship didn't feel as fleshed out as the one from films such as Punch Drunk Love or Phantom Thread. Again though, that might be all by design, because it's about a relationship that can't really grow into anything. It can't really be, so it never culminates in any way. Again, it's about a juvenile, premature relationship. Aside from the relationship angle, the rest of this film kind of plays out like a slice of life film of that particular period in time. It's quite similar to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'd also just like to point out this recent trend with A-list auteur directors going back and making films about certain periods of Hollywood, like certain historical periods of filmmaking and showbiz. You got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you got Mank, you got Last Night in Soho. I just think it's interesting. It's like they're all going back and revising the history of the craft. Then you have films like The Irishman, which is a bit different, but still that is sort of revisiting or like paying homage to this old style of an epic film, an epic 80s gangster film or something or other. That's like 4 hours long. That is in part about the old way of movie making. Just basically all these directors going back and saying, I remember when we could actually just like make films, we weren't consigned to certain run times or fucking... But anyway, back to Licorice Pizza. It's slow and slice of life, but I wouldn't say it ever gets boring. It's actually a very pleasurable film to sit through. There are so many other great performances throughout the film of characters that just come and go, have like one or two scenes, and it's some great actor, some great performance that's just really instantly captivating and leaves such a big impression. Like, it's the kind of acting that's just inherently entertaining just to watch. Sean Penn was marvellous. Benny Safdie was in it, one of the Safdie brothers. He was really fucking good, actually. He's a great actor. There's a whole sequence near the end of the film involving Bradley Cooper, which plays like one of those really tense Tarantino scenes, where it just goes on and on and on, but it's like constantly suspenseful, and you're like on the edge of your seat, like going, what's gonna happen, bloody hell. And it's like quiet and slow, but just fucking great. That was just sick to sit through. There are some directors who can make a scene about anything and make it extremely captivating just through the way they shoot it. Paul Thomas Anderson, easily in that league. A lot of aspects of this film are flawless, but I'm not quite ready to call this a new masterpiece from my favourite director. Like another perfect gem. Compared to most other films, it's very, very good, but compared to other PTA films, there's something lacking. Some emotional core maybe, some three-dimensionality here and there, something that needs a bit more fleshing out, just overall speaking on an emotional resonance level. Like The Master and Punch Drunk Love looked into my fucking soul. I fucking love those films. And like I really connected with them. And this film didn't quite do that. But even in saying that, I feel like I'm holding it at really high standards. I'd still definitely just highly recommend this film though. And if you're watching this review and you're thinking, oh that film doesn't look like my cup of tea, oh I don't think so, I think I'll stick with a Marvel film or something that's a bit more easier. Something where it has like action in it, you know. Just forget about that. Block that fucking thought out of your mind for a sec. And take a chance, watch Licorice Pizza, please. Don't watch Eternals, don't watch Black Widow, don't watch Shang-Chi, don't watch Hawkeye, I haven't even fucking watched that, I don't care. Please, just take a chance, just for me, watch Licorice Pizza. Just for me, just do me a favour. Just fucking watch it, just fucking watch it. It's pretty fucking easy. To be fair, I don't even know how you'd see it, don't even know if it's out yet. And that was the last film. That brings us to the end of this 5 films from 2021 recap, because my laptop's been in the shop for over a fucking month and there was a big delay, context, all that shit. I hope you've enjoyed this video, because it'll be really shit if you haven't. See ya, chump!